The House on Sycamore Lane, based on a true story. In 1993, the Parker family, Tom, his wife Linda, and their 2 children, moved into an old Victorian house on Sycamore Lane in a quiet Ohio town. The house had stood vacant for years, its once grand appearance now faded with age. Locals whispered about the place, claiming it had a dark history, but the Parkers weren't superstitious and were thrilled to get such a large house for a low price. At first, everything seemed fine. The family loved the spacious rooms, the large backyard, and the charm of the creaky wooden floors. But after a few weeks, strange things began to happen. Linda started noticing cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere. No matter how often they sealed the windows or checked for cracks, the icy air would sweep through the house, particularly in the evenings. One night, Tom was working late, and Linda was upstairs putting the children to bed. As she tucked in her youngest, she heard a soft knock on the door, followed by the sound of footsteps descending the staircase. Assuming it was Tom arriving home, she called out to him, but there was no answer. She checked downstairs, but the house was empty. The front door was locked, and Tom's car wasn't in the driveway. Shaken, Linda told Tom about the strange noise when he returned home, but he dismissed it as the house settling, or maybe an echo from outside. However, over the next few nights, the footsteps continued. They would hear soft, deliberate steps in the hallway or on the staircase, but every time they investigated, no one was there. Then came the voices. It started with their daughter Emma, who mentioned hearing whispers coming from the walls at night. She claimed the voices were friendly at first, calling her name softly as she fell asleep. Tom and Linda chalked it up to Emma's vivid imagination, but soon their son Jake also started complaining about the voices. He said they were louder and angrier, warning him to leave the house. One evening, as the family was eating dinner, the kitchen lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, they all heard a loud crash from upstairs, as though something had fallen or been thrown. Tom grabbed a flashlight and ran upstairs, expecting to find a fallen shelf or a broken window. But when he reached the upstairs hallway, everything was in place, except for one thing. At the end of the hallway, the door to the attic, which had been locked since they moved in, was wide open. Tom hesitated but walked toward the attic, shining his flashlight into the dark space. The beam caught on something, a tall, narrow shape standing just at the edge of the light. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure didn't move, but as he blinked, it disappeared. Tom slammed the door shut and bolted it, refusing to speak about what he'd seen. The family's nights became increasingly disturbed. The footsteps grew louder, the whispers more persistent, and the cold drafts turned into bone-chilling gusts that would sweep through the rooms. The children refused to sleep in their own rooms, terrified of the voices and shadows that seemed to lurk in every corner. Desperate, Linda decided to research the history of the house. What she found sent chills down her spine. In the 1920s, the house had been owned by a wealthy businessman, Thomas Reed, and his family. Reed had a reputation for being strict and controlling, particularly toward his wife Margaret and their young son. According to old newspaper clippings, one evening, a fire broke out in the house under mysterious circumstances. The fire consumed the attic, and tragically, Thomas's wife and son perished in the flames while Thomas survived. Some townspeople suspected foul play, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. Shortly after the fire, Thomas vanished, leaving the house abandoned for years. Disturbed by the discovery, Linda contacted a local historian who confirmed the story. He mentioned that several families who had lived in the house over the years reported strange occurrences, cold drafts, footsteps, and the feeling of being watched. One family even claimed to have seen the ghost of Margaret Reed, her face burned and twisted in agony, wandering the hallways at night. That night, the Parkers made the decision to leave. As they packed up their things, the house seemed to fight back. Objects were thrown from shelves, doors slammed shut on their own, and the air was filled with the deafening sound of footsteps running up and down the stairs. As they drove away from Sycamore Lane for the last time, Linda glanced in the rearview mirror. Standing in the upstairs window was the shadowy figure of a woman, her burned face staring down at them as they disappeared into the night. The house on Sycamore Lane remains vacant to this day. Locals still tell stories of the haunted house, where the tragic souls of Margaret Reed and her son are said to wander, forever trapped in the place where they met their untimely deaths.